Welcome to the first session and the opening keynote of this prestigious 20th anniversary MAPIC. So I'm pleased that you could all be with us here this morning to join us. And for me, it is a great privilege to actually be asked to actually do this session. I have been doing lots of conferences here for the last 10 years, so it's quite nice to be chosen to do the opening keynote. So welcome all of you to this morning's session, Back to the Future, and what's in store for the future of retail. I would like to, first of all, invite my panelists up to the stage. Unfortunately, one of the panelists who was due to be with us this morning, Stephen Cohen from Blue Ink in the UK, due to unforeseen circumstances, is no longer able to travel to Cannes. But I'm sure that won't affect this morning's session. And first of all, I would actually like to invite to the stage Richard Collier, Senior Director of Abercrombie & Fitch. Richard worked for Abercrombie & Fitch for 5 years, leading the expansion of the A&F and Hollister brands throughout Europe and the Middle East. Abercrombie & Fitch is the most successful specialty retailer in operation today. Their casual, classic, all-American lifestyle brand of clothing is synonymous with quality and encompasses 4 concepts: Abercrombie & Fitch, Abercrombie, Hollister & Co, and Gilly Hicks. Please welcome Richard Collier. Our second panelist this morning is Philip Evans, CEO of Tri-Granite Management Corporation. Philip joined Tri-Granite Management in December 2011 with a mandate to internationalise the operational arm of the Tri-Granite Group. With a mixed portfolio in excess of €2 billion spread across 14 countries on 3 continents. He has specific responsibility for asset management, leasing, marketing, facilities management, and finance. During 2012, he restructured the organisation, took TGM into new markets, and won significant new third-party mandates. Philip's experience spans a variety of markets, including Syria, Jordan, Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, Russia, and Central Europe. Please welcome Philip Evans. Next, we have Matteo Janel, Director of Strategic Planning, Publicis Shopper. Matteo has been working in digital agencies for 10 years and is an expert in the elaboration of strategies and digital ecosystems to support the brand promise. He also has sound experience in CRM and retail, having worked particularly on how to integrate digital tools to best accompany consumers throughout their relationship with a brand. Matteo has been strategic planner at Publicis Modern since 2007, having previously worked as an account executive, ergonomical and consultant in social media. Publicis Shopper is the shopper and customer relationship agency of Publicis Group in France. Its mission for clients, brands, and retailers is to transform each consumer into a buyer, creating a long-term relationship between consumers and brands. Please welcome Matteo. John Haddon, Senior Vice President of Retail Property for MH Alshire Company. John has 20 years' experience in the retail property industry in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, having started his career in the UK working with Debenhams and joined Alshire in 1997 to lead the store development function. He has worked in the Middle East for over 15 years and has opened over 2,500 retail stores in 17 countries in the Gulf region, Russia, Turkey, North Africa, and CEE. John left Alshire in 2002 to join Starbucks as Store Development Director for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, rejoining Alshire in 2004 with responsibility for property development, including real estate, store design, construction, and facilities management with brands in all countries. Please welcome John. And last, but by no means least, Carl Karcher, Managing Director of Mindfolio. Carl is MD of Innovation and Analytics Management Consultancy Mindfolio, developing visions, experiential master plans, and advanced consumer behaviour insights for retail, leisure, and residential real estate environments across the world. Previously, he was Senior Vice President with the Lego Group, responsible globally for new business development, retail, and global licensing. He led strategy, design, construction, and pre-op of 2 $500 million tourism projects that created branded family parks, Legoland Windsor and Legoland California, and masterminded the international retail strategy for the Lego Group, developed its first computer games and a Toy of the Year. Mindfolio is a management consultancy for retail, leisure, and residential real estate environments, linking and leveraging 2 centres of gravity: innovation and analytics. Please welcome Carl. So that's a brief introduction, ladies and gentlemen, to our panel members. And now for this morning's session. The retail industry is becoming more complex and changing at an ever-increasing speed. Shifting demographics, household downsizing, more educated consumers, new channel formats, among other trends, require that the industry quickly adjust and modify existent models, approaches, and processes to satisfy the needs of future customers in order to be successful and profitable. Retailing will become a successful industry that realizes more and more that it must tailor its offerings to selected customers, as opposed to the mass appeal approach of the 1980s, in order to win over customers and foster greater customer loyalty. There has been a seismic shift of bricks and mortars retailers onto the web over the last decade, with almost every major player now at some level offering clicks and bricks capabilities. With a few exceptions, there has been relatively little traffic the other way, of pure play online retailers opening up physical stores. In recent months, this has begun to change, with an increasing number of online businesses investigating the potential of some form of physical presence. For a long time, pure-play retailers have decried the costs, inflexibility, and limitations of physical stores, preferring the infinite SKUs, distribution, and low costs of a pure web model. However, as physical retailers have begun to combine on- and offline models in more innovative ways, the potential of a mixed format model has become more and more attractive. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's see what the panel has to say on this future of retail. Not good. So looking at the future of retail, I think I've got a big enough mouth anyway. Can we start then? How do you create a new industry when your global competition is heritage? New brands must have a fashion vocabulary that is unique and expresses a new aesthetic. What is the brand story and how has the concept developed? John, can we start with you? And how do you educate consumers in your line of business, obviously with Alshaya, with brands all over the world? How do you educate the people for the new brands? And what about the other side of going into new markets? How do you do that?
The company that I work for is a franchise organization. We have about 3,000 stores across Europe and the Middle East. And what we do is franchising. So we take brands from the US, from the UK, major international brands, and we develop those brands and basically open stores across multiple regions where the brands, for whatever reason themselves, don't feel that there's an opportunity for them to own and operate that pieces of real estate. Brands such as Starbucks, Debenhams, Cheesecake Factory are just a few of the brands that we represent. And one of the things that we do, and one of the things that I see changing quite a lot, is consumer habits, consumer behaviors, and the need for brands to continue to evolve and continue to change. Now, as a franchise operation, we're there basically to replicate. and hopefully do as well with what the brands do in their own markets. And so we're very much at the behest of the brands themselves and how they evolve over time as to how well we can successfully do. We're very fortunate that we're in a majority of our stores in a region like the Middle East where consumer spending is very, very high. And also, there was a huge amount of consumer knowledge of brands. So when we do our research and we talk to retailers across the world, many of the brands that we represent are actually already known, already established, and many of the consumers that we appeal to know the brands. Now, at the end of the day, you need to do a huge amount of customer research. You need to do a lot of data analysis, especially when you're entering new markets, and most of the markets we go into are developing markets. But at the end of the day, it's all down to whether or not that consumer will accept the brand, understand the brand, and then basically move with that brand and take it on as we move to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, for me, that is a lot, and I'll be interested to see what Richard says later on, but a lot of that is about the brands themselves. We find with some brands, if they remain static, if they don't evolve, if they don't change, if they don't understand and listen to the consumer, then we see not just in their own markets, but also in our markets, more importantly, the brand begins to suffer. And I think there is many, many brands around the world that are leading the change, listening to their consumer much more than they were before, understanding what that consumer wants, but also creating what I think is more of a lifestyle opportunity. Consumers can buy anything online. So whether you're Mothercare, you're Debenhams, whatever you are for the brands we represent, you can pretty much buy it online these days. The most important thing for us now is how do we create that environment? How do we create that shopping experience that the consumer wants to avoid them shopping online? Online is great, but at the end of the day, many of us here are involved in bricks and mortar, and we need to continue to evolve that experience. And I think that's the most vital thing for us with many of the brands.
Talking about engagement, Matteo, how do you integrate digital tools to assist consumers in this brand engagement?
It's because we try to educate our clients to embrace the whole path of purchase. Meaning, for a long time, retailers were focused on the moment people spend in their shop. And I think today it's much more than that. Meaning it's about, we are always speaking about creating a relationship with the brand, with the retailer. And it's really important to embrace the whole path of purchase, meaning you have to think about the after sales experience and the before. Meaning you have two things to leverage. And today, more about tools, we try to leverage data. Because if we use the data we collect about every client, we can help every brand, every consumer to be more accurate in the message they are addressing to their clients, to let them come in. And after, we try to give them even more good reason to generate preference and to come again. And speaking about tools, I think that smartphone can be very powerful because we are always stick to it. And it's some kind of extension of our bodies. And I think that I don't know what is the good things to do today. Because, as you said, it's a huge change we are facing today. And I think that what is really difficult and the only takeaway I tell to my client to take is that you have to test everything. It's about A/B testing. Don't be afraid to put, some money to develop an app, to make it evolve, to analyze the feedback you have on this app, and try not to be afraid to drop it if it doesn't work, and try another thing. And that's what all the GAFAs, meaning Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, are doing well. And this is the only thing you have to try to do, more testing. It's not about putting $10 million in R&D. It's quite difficult for retailers to do because they have assets they have to invest in and to make it evolve. But I think it's, yes, about testing and try to crack the way to use the mobile first experience.
So when we're looking at the future of retail, we're really looking at a kind of new consumer in the future, which is going to be a lot more difficult than the consumer of today, because there's an emphasis on personalisation and moving things forward. I mean, Phil, in your expertise, can you tell us a little bit about what you think the new consumer is going to look like in the future?
Well, I don't think the consumer is going to be any different. The consumer will be the same. The most important factor that we have to take into consideration is that the consumer of today is far better informed than the consumer of yesterday because of the online applications, social media, Facebook, etc. And when these consumers come to our shopping centres, they know exactly what they want to buy before they get there, and they're looking for the touch, the feel, and the experiential retail experience. And if retailers don't provide that, then there is no reason for them to get off their sofa and not shop online. And I think it's interesting to get a retailer's perspective and a franchised retailer's perspective. And John and myself will be very concerned to ensure that all of the sales are done in the store, in the shopping centres that we manage. Whereas Richard probably wouldn't mind if they're done online as opposed to bricks and mortar. So what we have to do as owners and managers of real estate is to make sure that that shopping experience is second to none. And we're kind of stuck on this 1 hour, 40-minute dwell time figure in Europe, whereas in the Middle East, the experience is 3, 4, 5 hours. And that's probably due to the weather, but they are far better at making sure that the shopping experience is a whole day out experience, because it involves great food, great leisure, great entertainment, as well as a great retail experience. And I think one other thing on the consumer, one thing that the retailers have to, and this is a personal experience I had just a few weeks ago, in a shopping center, went into one particular brand, they didn't have what we wanted, we went home and purchased it online. Now if I was the owner of that shopping center, I'd be very concerned, because that's a retail sale that I have lost the turnover rent on. Went into another retailer, they didn't have the product in store, but guess what? The sales assistant had their iPad there, and they did it for us, and they purchased it online, and we paid for it in the store. That's, I think, the message for retailers, that retailers have to make sure that they are capturing absolutely every single available spend and not letting it disappear online. And our responsibility as owners of real estate and managers of real estate is to make sure that we are creating that platform for retailers to excel, but also providing the right shopping experiential experience.
So retail really has moved from once being location to this experiential factor, and looking at what can be more about the living experience. I mean, Carl, how will we prepare in the future our malls and their fund managers for thriving in the Amazon age? How do you see this going forward?
Good morning. Well, any conversation about that, I think, has to start with consumers, and we already managed to talk about it. But I think we have to internalize that our consumers, irrespective of age, have become stimulation junkies. And by definition, that means we have to provide, in our stores and in our malls, stimulation dens. Because our job is not really to provide value for money or something, it's actually something much, much bigger. We have to provide the most enjoyable value for time. Otherwise, Amazon et al. Will actually take a bigger hit on us. But let's be fair, we're not starting at square one, are we? I mean, we have been working on that issue for years. And Philip just made something, a very, very good comment, I think, because some of our colleagues are a step ahead. And I'm particularly thinking of fund managers in the West. And when I say West, I talk about maybe Central Europe, Western Europe, particularly the States, perhaps to look to the East, because our colleagues in the East, and when I say East, I mean Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, Bangkok, possibly Sydney even, they have learned to live with providing 3-hour experience malls and the expense which goes with it. I think so our fund managers in the West, which I think still struggle a little bit with that, can take a few lessons from our colleagues from the East. But East or West, it doesn't really, I mean, innovation will remain key. And innovation, and there's wonderful stuff around. Retail innovation, I mean, if we have time, we can talk about it. Tenant innovation, we're not talking enough about landlord innovation. What can we do, create far more, what I would call interesting leasing concepts, for an example. Placemaking. I get worried sometimes about placemaking, because sometimes small operators think putting black boxes into malls is the equivalent of placemaking. Is it heck? So I think there are many tools we still have to make sure that we remain absolutely on the edge and can compete with anybody. Actually, compete with Amazon. I don't really think Amazon is an enemy. I think that whole digital, if you like, environment is a wonderful opportunity for us to reinvent and adjust ourselves. So I don't want to see them as enemies. I want to see them as facilitators in many ways.
When we look at the reinvention of retail, I think as things move forward, things are moving more in the direction of kind of niche retailing. And that will populate, obviously, the bricks and mortar world. But what about, obviously, the specialty retailers that are looking at kind of bigger portfolios of smaller footprint stores? I mean, John, as Alshire, as you move forward, do you think your portfolio is going to adapt so that you're going to look at the different sizes and change your kind of portfolio? How do you think it will work?
I think everybody sort of mentioned the consumer experience, and that's fundamentally what it's all about. The portfolio will change. If you'd asked me 5-10 years ago, certain brands we have and the size of store and what we needed in the shopping malls, it's changed considerably. Some brands need smaller space, some brands need bigger space. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about the product, and it's all about what they're selling and what the consumer really wants. And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but one of the things I just wanted to focus on a little bit is some of the stuff that is going on around the world, and especially in the Middle East. I think that we're quite fortunate in the region to have 3 or 4 of the world's best malls. And if you look at those malls and what they've done more recently, especially in Dubai and in Kuwait, they have changed the concept of retail over a very, very short period of time by making sure that that experience that the consumer has is one that they want to repeat and repeat and repeat, not just once a week, not once a month, but twice a week, 3 times a week. And they've done that through leisure, they've done that through food and food offers, and they've done it from having points of difference. Now, many of you in here, I'm sure, have seen the ski slope at Mall of the Emirates, you'd have seen the aquarium at Dubai Mall, and more recently in the last few weeks as I go around the Middle East and go a little bit further, the malls that are going to win and the malls of the future, because many of us here are talking about bricks and mortar, are the ones that are able to adapt that and give that all-day experience or that longer dwell time. Because as I said right at the start, you can buy anything online now. So the experience is not necessarily about the product you want to buy. It's the experience you and your family, and the family, especially in the Middle East, is very important, have as you go. Because if your kids want to go back again, if your wife wants to go back again, they'll want to go back mainly for the experience. And I think as we look to evolve and we look to change, none of this comes without cost, obviously, both to the retailer and to the landlord. I think the shopping mall industry, especially in Europe and the US, has to evolve and change. Otherwise, it's just going to die and online will take over. So how we change that and how we evolve that is all about experience in my mind. And it's easier said than done. But I think some of the stuff that is going on in the East, as Carl mentioned, really people need to learn from that. Because there needs to be a point of difference with every single shopping centre. Because the brands are the same. The brands are global. You go around any shopping mall in Europe, any shopping mall in the Middle East, pretty much the brands are the same. You're going to see the same brands one after the other. It changes a little bit, but US brands are now coming to Europe, coming to the Middle East. Some European brands are going to the US. So the mix is the same. So how do I create that point of difference? And for me, it's about family entertainment. It's about food. It's about the experience.
It is true, though, isn't it? You can go anywhere around the world now. We were discussing this, whether it's Paris, New York, Singapore, you can walk in a mall and it's the same retailers. And Matteo, have you got any advice on how you can work with the consumer and strengthen that relationship on the CRM and the...
I think it's just about listening to them. And most of the time we are speaking... For a long time, we're speaking about Facebook and social media, but I think that today most of the brands are not listening. They are just pushing content through Facebook. There is no or little bit discussion and a really small conversation. So I think that in the physical world, what a retailer can do is to try, as you said, you have helpful staff at Abercrombie. And I think that thanks to digital, and because everything is digital today, we crave for human contact. And I think that today, if a retailer can give digital tool to bring expertise to their staff, meaning you speak about specialized franchise, and you know that if you are a sports retailer, you try to hire people who are fond of sports, but there is so much technology, so much new things every day that digital tools can enhance the vendors, the salespeople expertise. So I think, yes, digital can help a brand to be more expert, to be more helpful within the store. And within the digital world, I think that most of the retailers have to, not to go especially on social media, but to create their own platform to listen. Because listening to the client, you do this via studies, but if you want to do this directly and in a more dynamic way, you have to create your own tool and your own media. It's really, really important today.
Phil, you have a wealth of expertise both on the developer side and obviously working with the retail concepts as well. If we look at the rise of the anchor place, like the store of the future, the shopping centre of the future is going to be closer to the customer. So we will see the demise of the anchor store, but more as an anchor destination. Now, how do you see going forward that this is going to create the ultimate experience? Because I know in the past we've always looked at anchor department stores and everything as that, but that's going to change, isn't it? It's going to be more of an anchor destination rather than one store itself.
Well, I think department store is interesting. Before we talk about the department store, we should talk about the hypermarket. And most shopping centres in Western Europe, America, Central and Eastern Europe, where we've done a lot of developments, are all hypermarket anchored. Why? I have no idea. Because they don't actually add too much to the overall shopping centre experience. People go in, they buy their food, they go home. How is that going to increase dwell time? But I think that's kind of where shopping centres have emerged and come from is being based around the hypermarket, and that's still very much the case in the Middle East. When we're planning shopping centres there, it's who is the hypermarket going to be? But really, in the shopping centre of the future, hypermarkets don't really add too much value and don't drive dwell time and don't add to the overall shopping experience. They should be located more in kind of neighborhood centers close to residential hubs. The department store conundrum is an interesting one. I attended the department store summit in Singapore earlier this year and listened to a very interesting panel with different CEOs of department stores around the world, and they were talking about e-commerce, and they were almost clueless as to what to do in terms of e-commerce, because department stores are representing a number of brands. So in some respects, it's very similar to a shopping center owner. And they have no control over the different brands that they house in their shopping center, in their department store, sorry, in terms of their online platforms. So, but they knew that they had to embrace it, but they weren't sure how. And so what they are focusing on is the in-store experience. And changing their department stores to make sure that the shopping centers that come have an absolutely first-class experience. And there's one department store in Korea where in Asia now, in the whole of the world, taking selfies is very, very popular, but no more so than in Asia. And this department store operator actually developed or designed a room within the department store where women actually look more attractive than they actually are. So women are going there en masse to take selfies and then post them online. It's an interesting experience, it's an interesting concept, but it works. And I think retailers have to think about the experience that they're providing to their customers. So that will undoubtedly change the makeup of the anchor tenants in the future.
And what about you, John? Because you've got experience with department stores. Have you felt that this is changing as you go forward?
I think the anchor store chain that we have is Debenhams, the UK department store chain. And I think for us, Debenhams is a Middle East deal for us. And I think the Middle East is still has anchor stores, still needs anchor stores, and is a little bit different in terms of that. So I think for us, the department store is actually quite good for us, because what it does enable us to do is to trial things. So we've got a department store business there where it's full of different brands, and if we have new brands that we want to introduce into the market that we may not necessarily be 100% certain the consumer will want to involve with standalone bricks and mortar stores, it actually gives us that opportunity to trial something, see how it does. If it works, then we can take it from a concession business into a standalone business. If it doesn't work, then at the end of the day, we've not invested a huge amount in terms of the trial.
And Carl, what do you think it will take if a traditional anchor tenants become increasingly too weak for purpose?
Now it's getting touchy. I think if you're already in trouble, then there's probably no way out because it's not going to get better. No, but really, I think when we talk about anchors, it's very useful to remember its original name. The original name for anchor was draw tenant. And I think that's a very, very good name because that makes the assessment whether we should have this anchor, whatever it may be, hyper or department store, easier. Because if that anchor draws their business from your catchment, why on earth would you give him peppercorn rents? If, however, that anchor draws from outside, then maybe there's a case to be made. But in many ways, I think there's another element to make an assessment what sort of anchors one should have. Because the most valuable anchors must be the one who deliver to the mall what the mall itself needs most. What the mall itself needs most. And that is unique experience, some sort of differentiation, and of course, quality footfall. Not numbers, quality footfall. And I think we've already mentioned it. We have to leave probably some of our blinkers behind because we tended to talk about hypermarkets and department stores in many cases. Anything these days, and that's the wonderful thing about innovation, anything these days can be an anchor. As long as it has critical mass of benefits that essentially make people travel. That can be an anchor. And, you know, it can be even placemaking. I mean, when you think what Rick Caruso has done in the Grove in LA, that, you know, that central, what I would call landscape piece, is an anchor. So it seems to us that in many ways, anchor innovation is probably one of the most exciting bits in our industry. Because, you know, think of food markets or critical mass of food. Think of health and beauty, having a store on health and beauty or that sort of thing. And it seems to me that there are many, many more opportunities open for us to create differentiation if we think of anchor just a little bit differently.
And I mean, one of the big topics, obviously, which we can't delve in too much because of time, is technology. I mean, do you feel, Matteo, that there is a fine line between technology becoming pervasive and obviously it becoming interconnected between the brands? How do we stop it becoming one rather than the other, and how do we work together to make it create the right image moving forward?
It's by, I think it will sound a little bit weird, but you don't have to think about technology first. You point it out very well. I think it's about what the value you want to bring to your consumer. And then, just after that, you can think about technology. Because today, you know, I think you can't fight the consumer habits. You have to serve every consumer today. And I think that on the web, we were speaking about responsive design. Meaning the design of your website, of your web experience has to adapt itself to every device, every habit of the consumer. You can't fight it. You have to do it. And I think for the commerce, you have to adapt your chain of value to every touch point where your consumer is. But I think that today, and Abercrombie Fitch show it today, that you have to think about the value, the emotion you want to bring into your store first. Because Amazon will never do that. They are utility, they are tools, a service, because they are from the web. And if you think in terms of brand, the brand is a very powerful tool to make people come, because they will have a good reason, because they know what kind of experience they will have in your store today.
I mean, before we just ask questions, I mean, it is important then when we're looking at data, I mean, Carl, what will it take to conquer the fear and jealousy about sharing data between landlord and retailer for a win-win result?
Please don't fall asleep when we start talking about data. It sounds a very boring subject, but actually it's quite important. Actually, it's a wonderful dichotomy, is there not? Because we all sort of got easy about talking omni-channel and apps, and we realized that physical and digital basically have become inseparable. And yet, isn't it amazing? Isn't it somewhat strange? When we talk about leasing contracts, we essentially talk about the physical world. Who has really thought hard about integrating the digital aspects, the digital IPs, into what leasing will be tomorrow? I predict that will be the next big leasing nettles in terms of making sure that data sharing can happen. I'll give you 2 examples. Beacons. Every retailer wants a beacon because obviously via smartphone you want to give the people. Now, if you want to do it on your own, you're going to change batteries every 3 months in 100 different beacons. Or you do it via the mall, who basically has supplied you with power. The mall wants a beacon as well, so will they basically clash? Another very boring word is application programming interface. It's boring, but actually it allows 2 systems to talk to one another. Every mall over time would want to be a mini Google. So when the consumer comes in and says, where's that black dress? They can see it. Well, it'll not happen unless retailer and malls cooperate with API. So boring stuff on the face of it, I have to tell you. But what you're talking about is building the priceless marketing infrastructure of the future. So I think it is worth really thinking about it.
Jane, can I just add 1 point on that? I think utopia for me, as an owner and operator of malls, is cooperation not just with the retailers but also Google, so that we can send our customers a message alert as they go through our shopping centres, because we know their Google search history and we know that they were looking for a pair of Levi jeans in size 12, and we can send them a message saying the store, 3rd store on the right as you're walking through the shopping centre, 4th shelf down the left-hand side has your size in stock today. And I think that, if we can get to that stage in the future, then we will really take on e-commerce. But that involves a huge amount of collaboration.
That's API.
And before we finish, are there any burgeoning questions from the audience for our panelists? There's a gentleman here.
In your experience, the beauty centers, are they really power centers? They are anchor centers for malls? The beauty centers, like spas and things like that, do they really work as an anchor?
That's probably a reference to what I said. No, I didn't mean a spa. There's actually Harvey Nichols developed a standalone concept of health and beauty over 3 floors. So that is an anchor. A spa in its own right is usually associated with a hotel and a day spa. That's an interesting tenant, but I wouldn't necessarily say on its own it's an anchor, no. But I mean, the Harvey Nichols thing, I know what we say, it's pretty cool.
I think it's just a value add. I don't think it's that important for a centre or certainly for a department store to have it, because I think, as you said, the experience is more aligned to a different type of experience rather than shopping.
Any more questions? There's a gentleman at the front.
Hello, my name is Agon Ferry, and I represent an Albanian company which is developing a shopping center lately in Tirana, in the capital. And what we're struggling most is that how can we get you guys to come in this shopping center, to come in the country? How can we get your attention? And my question goes to Philip, Mr. Philip. I mean, what did you do, and how can we take from your experience so Abercrombie and Fitch can come to Albania, can come to our shopping center? Because we can never get in touch with these guys, and it's a bit struggling, you know? Thank you.
Where did you say? Tehran?
Tirana.
Tirana.
It's Albania.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting question. I think in order to attract the likes of Abercrombie and Fitch and Hollister and the huge stable of brands that Al Shire represent, any developer has to have credibility. and prove to the retailers that they're going to build something which is sustainable over the longer term, and demonstrate that they understand how the retailers are going to make money in that mall. So you've got to be able to demonstrate that you've done your research, you understand what the catchment is, you understand the socio-economic profile of your potential customers, and how much money they're potentially going to spend within that shopping centre. Retailers are looking for new markets all the time, and franchise retailers, they have an obligation to the brands that they represent to open a certain number of new stores every year. So they are looking for new markets. But I think for new and interesting markets, it's all about the developer having a track record, or if it doesn't have a track record, about bringing people in that do have a track record and are able to deliver, develop, and manage something which is sustainable over the longer term.
Well, I'm sorry, but we're out of time, but the panelists will be available if you want to ask any more questions. And in summarization, for companies that can manage complexity and respond to market forces, the future will be a time of tremendous growth opportunities. The companies most at risk will be the incumbent leaders. If exploitation of existing opportunity causes inertia on newly emerging opportunities, going forward, the market will talk to the retailers and suppliers that tune in. Consumers will tell you what they want if you know where to listen. More places to listen to consumers and spot trends, more tools and technologies to enable more focused responses, and greater opportunity to be specific, individualized, and relevant. To succeed, retailers and suppliers must remember who got them there, and also embrace new assumptions that drive the new outlook. Past business drivers will wane, but won't entirely disappear. New business drivers will become more prevalent. Thank you for attending the session. I hope it's been useful for you, and thank you to this morning's panelists.